Hey guys, this is Ollie from iwillteachyoualanguage.com. Now today I'm really excited to be talking about the 80-20 principle. This is something I'm sure you've heard of. It's very widely spoken about in especially in business circles, and the 80-20 principle basically holds that 80% of your results come from only 20% of your effort. Okay, so the implication is that your effort does not equal results. Okay, 80% of the results you get only come from 20% of the work that you put in, which suggests that of everything you do, only 20% really takes you closer to your goals. Okay, so if we were going to apply the 80-20 principle to language learning, then first of all, what we need are goals. Goals are important because if you don't know where you're going to, you can't work backwards and figure out what you need to do to get there. So the first step in applying the 80-20 principle to language learning is defining your goals. Short-term goals are good. Long-term goals are also fine, but you need to have something tangible you can work towards. So, what are your goals for this week? What are your goals for this month? Very good to think about these things. Now, here we go. 8 ways to apply the 80-20 rule to language learning. Number 1, word frequency list. It's the case in most languages, certainly in English, that the majority of the words, the majority of all language that's used is made up of only in the region of 100 words. Now there are different statistics flying around about this, but if you think of it like this, 100 of the most frequent words in English account for half of all usage. Then it gives you an idea of the importance of those words. So if you're just starting out in a language, one of the most useful things you could do in the early stages is to figure out what are the 100 or so most high frequency words in the language and learn them first. It's only good really for the first couple of weeks or so of language learning, because after that, once you know these words, you have to move on. But nevertheless, it's a useful place to start. Number 2, set short-term goals. I just spoke about this briefly, but you see, a lot of people, if you ask them, well, what's your aim? The answer comes back, well, I want to be fluent. Not specific enough, not clear enough. You've got to break it down. How are you going to get there? Now, knowing how to get there is often the hardest part of this. The first step is to have the goals themselves, short-term goals. The next step is to know how to get there. So this is point 3. In order to do an effective 80-20 analysis of your language learning and where you have to go, you need to educate yourself. You need to know what you're dealing with. You wouldn't run a business without understanding the marketplace or without understanding products or your customers. The same thing holds for language learning. You need to have an awareness of different strategies and different methods for learning. Otherwise, how are you going to get where you want to go? So a great place to start are one of the many fantastic blogs that are out there on language learning, YouTube videos. There's so much fantastic free stuff out there that a bit of time spent judiciously reading up on how people learn languages is certainly time well spent. Number 4, past experience. Now, if you think back to your language learning experiences at school, I think a lot of people would say, well, they weren't particularly positive. Mine certainly weren't. I didn't get much out of my 3 years of French and German. However, I do remember some of the things we had to do, some of the exercises that our teacher would give us, and some of them I quite liked and they worked pretty well for me. Off the top of my head, 2 things were writing out sample dialogues, writing out conversations and having them checked by the teacher. I remember learning a lot from that. I also remember spending week after week learning word lists, vocabulary lists. Now this kind of flies in the face of conventional wisdom about language learning a list of 10 words. However, I can still remember, the fact is I can still remember a lot of those words that I learned at school. Even now, 20 years later, 15 years later. So, if you think back to something you used to do in the past, in a previous learning experience, and you remember it being good, or you remember enjoying it, then now would be a great time to revisit that and do it again. If it works for you, then it could very well bring you good results right now. Next, your study habits. What do you spend most of your time doing? Do you mostly speak? Do you mostly watch movies? Do you mostly read books? There are 4 skills to a language: listening, speaking, reading, writing. And whilst we could argue about the relative importance of all of them, one very good way to make a lot of progress quickly is by addressing the skills which you have neglected a bit. So if you spend a lot of time speaking, well, how about changing it and spend some time writing? If you spend a lot of time reading, how about doing some listening? So look at what the time that you're spending on skills and see if you can rebalance them a little bit. Something that you've neglected is likely to bring you quite a lot of results in the short term. Next, feared things. Now, this is one of my favourites, and it applies to all walks of life, but especially to language learning. Is there anything that you have been putting off because you're afraid of it? Now, obviously, I don't mean afraid in the sense of Freddy Krueger. I mean afraid in the sense of you really don't want to do it. If there is, then the chances are doing that would also bring you very quick results, because you're outside your comfort zone and you're going to be challenging your brain. A very obvious example is in the case of Asian languages. If you say Chinese and Japanese, a lot of people start learning Chinese and Japanese saying, I'm not going to learn Chinese characters because I'm only interested in speaking. Fine, we don't need to get into the various merits of that right now, but the fact remains that if you do put it off, then very quickly it turns into this huge thing that you don't want to go anywhere near, because learning Chinese characters is a huge undertaking. A lot of people put it off. If you're one of those people, then tackling that will bring you very quick results, because it's not just about writing, it's about making connections between words and characters. So think about your own experience. Is there anything that you're afraid of in language learning, and could you potentially tackle that? Number 7, be honest with yourself. Now, have you ever caught yourself telling people something like, I study an hour a day, or I study 10 hours a week, and you keep telling people that, and then one day you turn around and have a long, cold, hard look in the mirror and you realise, actually, I don't do that. My 1 hour a day is now 1 hour a couple of times a week, or my 1 hour often becomes half an hour. Be honest with what you're actually doing, your study routines, because if you're doing less, you're actually doing less than you should be, then upping that time and putting in the effort and the hard graft that you should will also have some very big impacts in the short term. And then number 8, common sense. Highly underrated common sense. People often look for these, the next best polyglot approach to language learning. Not always necessary. A healthy dose of common sense can go a long way. So let's say, for example, one of the most common complaints from language learners, I'm not good at speaking. I can't speak. I've studied a lot, but I just can't get the words out. Well, if that's true for you, then I would say you need to spend a lot of time speaking. It's a case of practice. If you can't speak, practice it. Likewise, I don't understand native speakers. Why not? Because they say all these words and I don't understand these words. Fine, if that's the case, you probably need to learn some more words. So, go off, there's your short-term goal, learn some more vocabulary as much as possible. So, a common sense approach like this can often be overlooked because, in the search for meaning in this vast world of information out there on the internet. But common sense can get you a long way. So there we go, 8 ways to apply the 80-20 principle to language learning. Don't forget to check out the site, iwillteachyoualanguage.com. There is a more expansive blog post about this on the site. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and why not share a link to it on social media as well. And I'll see you next time.